All right, guys, we are fast approaching the dog days of summer, and that means we are nearly devoid of any NFL news. Right now, we are hanging on to every morsel of information, every hype report, every puff piece coming out of training camps. But today here on this channel, we are going to do another installment of our Buy Low series, hopefully sifting through all those hype reports and puff pieces and actually identifying fantasy football assets that are currently undervalued in the market and are going to have a significant return on investment for your fantasy teams leading you to a championship in 2023. As always, like the video, comment down below about what you think of these buy low candidates, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you on the other side of that intro. Welcome back into Twin Takes Fantasy Football. As mentioned in the intro, today we're going to be continuing our Buy Low series, and today we'll be talking about the controversial position in fantasy of the running back position. It's very hotly contested with some people who are still RB truthers saying that they're the core to a good fantasy championship team, and while others are making the shift to a zero or hero RB strategy with the shift in offensive play schemes in recent years to a more pass-happy offensive play style. So with that being said, there's tons of value here with the running backs. And I understand that right now, as we approach the halfway mark of June, we're switching from dynasty to redraft content, but hopefully this video and the analysis in it can be taken and applied to any leagues that you're going into. Obviously, if it's if it's dynasty, do as the video says, buy low, go and trade some second round, third round draft capital, whatever I kind of equate would be good draft capital for these guys. Go acquire them. If you're in redraft or best ball, another type of format that's becoming very, very popular, this is just give you some information about guys that are great values at their current ADP, and you should probably try to aim and get them to get the most maximum value when you're doing your drafts, especially here in June with not a lot of information to go around. And before we get into the running backs, do want to give a small caveat. A lot of this buy low, sell high series, it's not based on all the current information present. It's based on what I perceive as is going to happen over the next 2 months, based on the actions of the teams, the contracts given out, the roster moves, the cuts, the draft picks, what I think is the situation that's going to be presented from now until the start of the season. So a lot of predictions that I'll break down is why I think the players' values is going to continue to go up or continue to go down. So, I know not all of my predictions will be right. Some of these I will miss on, but don't go to the comments and say, well, this hasn't happened yet. I know, I'm predicting it's going to happen. That's what good fantasy football players do. They analyze the market and try to predict what's going to happen to achieve the most maximum value. So with that being said and out of the way, let's jump into our buy low candidates. I like to start off with one of my favorite buy low candidates right now, which is Miles Sanders, the newly acquired running back for the Carolina Panthers. First, I wanted to dispel any notion that he's being reunited with Frank Reich. Frank Reich left Philadelphia 2 years before Miles Sanders was drafted. So the only connection that they have is their association with Doug Peterson. So while Miles might be familiar with the language used in Frank Reich's play calling, might be familiar with the offensive playbook, given some overlap between Frank Reich and Doug Peterson's schemes, there really isn't that much of a connection over them being reunited. So maybe a small caveat to drop there, but he's not like going back and being reunited with a head coach who is very familiar with him. But with that being said, let's look at the list of reasons why I do love Miles Sanders as a fantasy asset for this year and frankly the next few years. He did sign a 4-year contract with the Carolina Panthers, being given the largest running back contract in free agency. I'm a big fan of follow the money, so if they have that much confidence in the Carolina Panthers organization to invest that $26 million into Miles Sanders, I'm willing to invest into him as a fantasy asset. And while he probably won't fill out the entire 4 years of that contract, he's certainly guaranteed to at least put up production for 3 years, in my opinion, of course. And frankly, if you're in Dynasty, when you draft a rookie running back, you're hoping for 3 years of production. So this guy is basically, in my mind, equatable to a first or second round draft pick at the running back position, except the fact that Miles Sanders has done it in the NFL before. So if you can acquire him for a second round pick, I think he's much higher value than any of the running backs outside the top 3 in Charbonnet, Gibbs and Bijan Robinson. So, a high second round pick for Miles Sanders, I think, is an absolute steal in Dynasty. Also, let's look at the pass catchers in Carolina. Leaves a lot to be desired. It's Terrace Marshall and Adam Thielen very much on the wrong side of 30. Jonathan Mingo, the rookie, as well as DJ Chark, the newly acquired wide receiver in free agency. None of those guys really scare me as far as someone who's going to be an alpha wide receiver who's going to just demand targets. So Miles Sanders is a very good pass catching running back, and I think he will be heavily utilized in the pass game. If we look back to Frank Reich's system, back when he's the offensive coordinator with the Philadelphia Eagles, over 80 out of 340 targets were to the running back position. That's over 20% of all passing targets were to the running position. Given Miles Sanders' savviness with catching the ball out of the backfield, I think he's going to be heavily utilized in that game, seeing probably a DeAndre Swift-esque number of 4 to 5 targets per game. And we all know pass catching running backs are a cheat code for fantasy. Also, something I like about the Carolina Panthers is they have quietly built one of the strongest offensive lines, especially for sure one of the best offensive lines in the NFC South. So Miles Sanders does go to a halfway decent offensive line to run behind and give him somewhat of a chance when he's trying to enter the second level of the defense. And this is, again, a very weak NFC South conference. I do believe that they'll have enough opportunity to run the ball. And when you're running against some of the weaker, if one of the weakest, if not the weakest conference in the NFL, it's going to allow for a lot of points and a lot of touches to be handed off to the running back position. Also, I do like the fact that Bryce Young is there. I know a lot of people are typically adverse to a rookie quarterback, but Bryce Young, I think, is going to be different in this scenario. He's one of the most NFL-ready quarterbacks coming out in college in the past decade. Insanely high football IQ, and he really does thrive with creating plays outside of the pocket, with creating screen passes, creating these opportunities for his running backs to really be successful in both the run game and in the pass game. Just have to look at the success he had with Jahmyr Gibbs back at Alabama, and I think it's going to translate well to Miles Sanders' game in Carolina. So I think it's a great win now move to secure Miles Sanders on your roster. And this ADP at 15, I do think that's just a touch low for what the value he can provide to your team. So moving on to our second running back is going to be another newly acquired running back in free agency, and it's going to be Jamal Williams. So let's talk about some of those predictions that I mentioned, right? Something I'm going to talk about in a very upcoming video is the Alvin, Dalvin, and Joe conundrum. This kind of era of running backs that have been good for 3 to 4 years, but they're aging out. They had pretty poor production, or at least a decreased production last year, and they all have rumors swirling about leaving their teams. We've already seen Dalvin Cook at this point depart from the Minnesota Vikings as a post-June 1 cut, and I do think that Joe Mixon and Alvin Kamara are soon to follow, given not only their poor production last year, but also the fact that they both have off-field legal issues swirling around them, and there is per the NFLPA, contracts in their clauses in their contracts that they can be dismissed for clause if they have allegations levied against them. But whether Alvin Kamara is on the team or not week 1, it still doesn't really matter for Jamal Williams, because at the very best case scenario for Alvin Kamara, he will have a very hefty suspension to serve, so he won't be there to vulture any of Jamal Williams' targets for this year. Also, Jamal Williams is coming off one of the best years, if not the best year of his career. He scored 17 touchdowns for the Detroit Lions last year, and I believe that the New Orleans Saints brought in Jamal Williams to do a very similar thing for their roster, to be that goal line back. Even if Alvin Kamara is still there, he's a much smaller, both physically in stature, and height and weight, than Jamal Williams is. And when you get to that goal line area, you need someone to run it in. In the past, they've used Taysom Hill, but I don't think that's going to fly for much longer, especially under Dennis Allen, now that Sean Payton is not there anymore. I think Jamal Williams brought in to take those goal line touches, and he'll still have that tremendous upside that drove him to being a running back 1 for fantasy, even as the RB2 of the Detroit Lions last year. Again, very, very similar situation to Miles Sanders, where playing in a very weak NFC South conference where I think it's just going to be points galore. I don't see a lot of threatening defenses amongst the Falcons, Buccaneers, Saints, and Panthers for that matter. So there will be plenty of opportunity for Jamal Williams to get his touches. Now, moving on to our third running back, finally a guy that wasn't that wasn't acquired in free agency, Kenneth Gainwell of the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, I really like Kenneth Gainwell, and I think he could be the running back one in this Philadelphia Eagles offense. And to prove that, we only have to look back at the 2022 Super Bowl, where even when Miles Sanders was still on the team, Kenneth Gainwell got the vast majority of touches out of the backfield and was incredibly efficient with him. I know there have been a lot of sexy names that have been driven to the Eagles this past offseason, whether it was acquiring Rashad Penny in free agency or DeAndre Swift through the draft process, trading for him during the draft process. They both have significant injury history. Not a single one of them has gone through a full NFL season without sustaining an injury or being out for a vast majority of that season. And Kenneth Gainwell has shown that he can be a workhorse and sustain a workload throughout the entire NFL season. If I had to make a prediction, he might not be the running back one at week 1 for the Philadelphia Eagles, but I think over the course of the season, he is the running back one. He is the guy that is going to sustain contact, going to be able to take the hits, going to be able to avoid the injury bug and be on the field for all 17 games, where I think both DeAndre Swift and Rashad Penny, unfortunately, just based on their history, will struggle with injuries. And because I believe that Kenneth Gainwell will most likely have the most touches of any running back in the Philadelphia Eagles, that's why I want him. If you put Kenneth Gainwell on another team, maybe I'm not as enthralled with him, but because he's attached to one of the most dynamic offenses, number 2 in offensive efficiency in 2022, that's why I want the running back associated with him. He's running behind the best offensive line in the NFL, despite losing Isaac Seumalo in free agency, and the threat of Jalen Hurts as a running back is going to open up a ton of rushing lanes and opportunities for Kenneth Gainwell. Everything about this is just, Kenneth Gainwell to the moon, and I think you can genuinely acquire him for a late second, early third round pick, and at that value, it's a very, very easy pickup for me. Being the running back 52 as far as current ADP goes right now is absolutely ridiculous. He's a guy that you should be targeting towards like 7th, 8th rounds of drafts, while everyone else is wasting their picks on DeAndre Swift and Rashad Penny. Moving on to running back number 4. We only took a quick break from the NFC South, right? Now we're back to the NFC South with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers running back. Don't worry, no Falcons running backs are on this list. None of them are buy low candidates as of now, unfortunately. You definitely have to overpay for Bijan Robinson, but we're talking about Rashad White here, running back for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Again, a guy that has done it, and everything he did last year shows to me that he's capable of taking that running back 1 spot. Even halfway through the season last year, we saw Rashad White usurp Leonard Fournette in touches out of the backfield and take over that running back spot over a guy that was, very beloved in the locker room. And Leonard Fournette was brought in specifically by Tom Brady, and was being paid not an insignificant amount of money to play running back for them. And Rashad White still outperformed him. And then on top of that, Leonard was released, so there's no real worry about him making a comeback. I know Keyshawn Vaughn is there, but Keyshawn Vaughn has been there for 3 years and hasn't really done anything with an opportunity. The fact that Rashad White came in as a rookie and immediately usurped Keyshawn Vaughn really has me not concerned about Keyshawn Vaughn vulturing any touches away from Rashad White. The only running back actually added to this backfield during the draft or free agency was Sean Tucker, who was an undrafted free agent. Yes, he was insanely hyped coming into the 2022 season, but his draft capital plummeted after the 2022 college football season due to injury concerns, lingering foot injury, and also apparently has a very severe heart condition. He is not even guaranteed to be on the team due to these medical issues once the start of training camp comes around. Something to pay attention to, but even so, I don't think that he has enough moxie, power. He's not going to be that guy that's going to take away a ton of touches from Rashad White. Sean Tucker, if he is utilized, will be in the pass catch screen game, while Rashad White will get a lot of the volume there. I know a lot of people are very out on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers this season. Obviously, they're going through a massive rebuild after losing Tom Brady and quite a few members of their roster, but I still think that with some of the moves that are to come with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Rashad White will have opportunity through just sheer volume, if nothing else. Maybe he's not the most talented guy on this list, but he will have a lot of volume. We've seen Baker Mayfield run a competent offense and run fantasy relevant running backs before in Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt. I think he can certainly sustain a fantasy relevant running back with Rashad White, especially with his pass catching ability. And I do believe, as we talked about in our sell high wide receiver episode, that Buccaneers, if they're smart and savvy, will be moving on from Mike Williams here shortly, and maybe Chris Godwin not too far off after that. So with those two potentially gone, and I do think that Mike Evans is a very likely candidate to get moved off of this roster. A lot more of the offense is going to be run through the play action, going to be run through the short game, and run through the run game with Rashad White. So I think 36 is way too low. I think he has the borderline potential to be a high-end RB2, maybe even sneak into a low-end RB1 just on sheer volume alone. So this is a guy that I'm taking everywhere in the later rounds of drafts, because this is just absolutely ridiculous in this valuation right here for a guy that's really an unquestioned running back one for his team. Moving on to our fifth running back. We'll pick up David Montgomery here, the newly acquired running back for the Detroit Lions. And honestly, we should just rename this channel from Twin Takes Fantasy Football to the Ben Johnson Fan Club, because of how much between these videos, between the post-draft rankings, between the mock drafts, about how much I'm just in love with Ben Johnson and what he has done as an offensive coordinator for the Detroit Lions. Obviously, it's not unfounded because he did lead the Detroit Lions to a top 5 team in offensive efficiency in 2022. So I'm really all in on any Detroit Lions asset for fantasy football. You won't see me talking bad about really any asset associated with them. But as far as the results to David Montgomery in particular, he, in my opinion, is the true running back one in Detroit. They shipped off Jamal Williams and Jahmyr Gibbs, the other Alabama prospect they have on their team. He's more of a quote-unquote versatile weapon. I know there's a lot of hype around him being drafted number 12 overall in the NFL draft just a month and a half ago. However, I think with how small and slight of frame that Jahmyr Gibbs is, he's going to be more utilized in the screen game, going to be lined up outside, especially in the pass game, especially as Jameson Williams serves that suspension for the first 6 months of the season. You'll see a lot of the running back pure touches out of the backfield go to David Montgomery, while Jahmyr Gibbs is used more in the screen game and the pass game, and maybe 1 or 2 jet sweeps, that sort of stuff. I'm also looking at David Montgomery and seeing the weight here of 222 pounds compared to Jahmyr Gibbs, 190 pounds or 195 pounds or so. His play weight is going to be less than that. I know he bulked up for the combine, but as far as when they get on the touch or when they get in the red zone, when they're 5 yards in, when they're handing the ball off for the touchdown upside, it's going to this man right here and this man only. Do not expect to see Jahmyr Gibbs running through tackles on the goal line. So David Montgomery is going to hoard all of that touchdown upside. And that's the same thing that drove Jamal Williams from a quote-unquote running back 2 position, like David Montgomery is kind of viewed right now in the running back 2 position. He could be the Jamal Williams to David Montgomery is going to be to Jahmyr Gibbs what Jamal Williams was to DeAndre Swift last year. So again, in that same offense that led to Jamal Williams being a top 12 running back. And I think David Montgomery, with the age being 26, with a slightly unproductive season last year, I think is a great buy low candidate for your season this year. Moving on, second to last one, we are cruising here with our running backs. Samaje Perine, another guy that I think I'm all in on the buy low train. And this is a guy that's buy low for this year only. I don't really see a pathway forward for him after this year, but if you're going to trade away a 3rd round pick, if you're a competing team, absolutely give a 3rd round pick for Samaje Perine. In best ball, pick him up in the late teens of your drafts. This is a guy that I think is completely undervalued right now. He will be the Broncos' primary running back. Don't get it twisted. This is what I talked about in the intro. There's a lot of hype pieces coming out about Javonte Williams, a lot of puff pieces from Sean Payton talking about how incredible it is, how versatile, explosive he is. But let's not forget the injury that Javonte Williams suffered. It was not just an ACL tear. It was an ACL tear, an MCL tear, and also was damage to the PCL. Very, very similar to J.K. Dobbins' injury 2 years ago. And we saw how that went on the field last year with J.K. Dobbins. He missed the first 6 weeks of the season, came back for a little bit, had to go back and get additional surgery to remove excess scar tissue and clean up some of the cartilage damage, and then finally was a relevant running back for maybe the last 4 weeks of the season. I truly, truly, truly do not think that Javonte Williams will be ready for this for the start of the 2023 season. And when he inevitably does come back during the season, he will be a much different player still recovering from those multiple tears of multiple ligaments in his knee. It is a devastating injury, and I just don't think that he's going to have the relevance that people are hyping up Jamal Williams to be. I understand he's a crazy running back. He is insanely athletic. He has so much hype around him, but just what we saw with J.K. Dobbins makes me terrified for Jamal Williams' production this year. And really, the only other person that's there to actually take spots or take targets and opportunities from the running back position is Samaje Perine, and he was very, very productive for the Bengals last year. Obviously, the Broncos wanted him. They brought him in. They brought him in for a reason. This is the same ownership and leadership that brought him in, so you have confidence in Samaje Perine, that they probably have the confidence in him to be that primary running back while Javonte is still recovering, frankly, throughout most of this upcoming season. And you can sincerely, when you acquire him for a 3rd round pick, you can go fly to Denver and shake Sean Payton's hand for you, for all the coach speak he's spewing out of his mouth about Javonte Williams right now. Oh, and it doesn't hurt that Samaje Perine has a bunch of pass catching ability as well. And we know pass catching running backs are a cheat code for fantasy. So, and last, but certainly not least, one of the most savvy. Yeah, apparently Johnner works for James Conner. Sleeper just gets me, even though it's late at night here and I can barely spell. But James Conner, this is a guy that I think has the potential, out of all these running backs on the list, could finish the highest. The ability that James Conner has possessed, even on an abysmal team like the Arizona Cardinals, is absolutely ridiculous. And the fact that he is almost 20th off the board as far as a running back is ridiculous. This is a guy that you cannot pass up on in drafts. He is, after the release of DeAndre Hopkins, the best offensive asset on the Cardinals, bar none. Marquise Brown is a second, but not a close second in my opinion. And even with Kyler Murray out for this season, you just have to look at James Conner's production after Kyler Murray went down with that ACL injury. He became the primary focus of that offense. He was both used in the run game and the pass game. Over that stretch of 7 games, those last 7 games, he was a top 3 running back for fantasy. What more could you want? And you're getting that production from a guy who's being drafted almost at the end of the 7th or 8th round, being the 19th running back off the draft board. That is absolutely ridiculous. If you're competing now, I would be absolutely willing to trade a high 2nd round rookie pick next year to go out and acquire James Conner. Again, this is a guy that probably gets cut off the team next year. This is purely for win now. This is a purely win now move for this year, but there is no one that has the upside of anyone on this list like James Conner. Really, really, the value for this year in 2023 alone, and that's why I like Dynasty so much, is a lot of people value youth and they value the future. But if you're really going all in for this year, you can get some of these great assets that are older, that are undervalued, just based purely on their age. And you could get a top 12 running back, a running back 1 for, a 2nd round pick, maybe a 2nd and a 3rd round pick, a couple 3rd round picks, or maybe an aging veteran, or maybe a younger player that you can move on from, frankly, that you don't think is going to contribute this year. So the things that I could say about James Conner, I know I'm rambling at this point, but the upside I know he is a very risky player, but the upside you're getting with the potential price, there is not a higher upside compared to the price you're paying for a player than James Conner in this draft. If you are in a dynasty and competing now, you need to acquire this guy. And if you're in a redraft, take him around early. Take him 2 rounds early. I promise you, you won't regret it. So that's going to wrap up this list of running backs to buy low on. I hope you guys enjoyed maybe opening your eyes to some of the more less sexy, boring running backs that are why they might not be as fun to draft, why the names might not be, the glitz and glammy names that you're used to. They're guys that are going to help you win and deliver consistent production throughout the season, especially as, best ball drafts go. I know it's a more popular game mode as we get closer to the season, as some of these, predictions that I've talked about, whether it's teams moving on from aging running backs, teams injuries starting to happen, the values of these guys are going to start catching up with what I'm predicting here. So if you're in best ball, definitely take these guys before their prices skyrocket in ADP. With that being said, I hope you enjoyed. Next week, we'll follow up with running backs to sell low on. For every good, we have to have a bad. For every yin, there is a yang. So until then, I hope you enjoy all the videos and take care.